This is Katerina Satori here. I'm a leadership mentor, wisdom channel, and an online teacher. And in this video, I'm going to dive into the topic of father wound, how to identify it, how to understand its purpose, and on how to start this incredible and courageous process of healing it. In my previous video, where I spoke about two karmic issues that we are going to face at one point or another, especially if we had turbulent childhood, traumatic childhood, or uncertain childhood, we are most impacted by these two wounds. And even if you had a relatively peaceful childhood, you still may be impacted by these two wounds because you take on the history of your parents, the karmic history of your parents, something that they were not able to resolve. The next generation carries the burden. And when you have awareness of that karmic history, karmic lineage, karmic patterns, you can do something that is truly remarkable. You can end ancestral suffering, ancestral secrets, ancestral blueprints, and you can start a new story. Maybe you are the pioneer in your lineage, that you're the first one who writes a story that is filled with light, that is filled with authenticity, that is filled with love. In the previous video, I named two karmic patterns. The wound with the mother will reflect in our romantic relationships, in challenging, accepting love, forming true intimate relationships, and opening ourselves to that level of intimacy that we deeply crave. We also have the father wound that deeply relates to money, our ability to generate abundance, our ability to receive abundance, or our ability to actually hold on to it or to keep it in a way that gives us a sustainable lifestyle. So let's dive right in. Why is relationship with the father will mirror our relationship with abundance? I first heard that insight from an inspiring teacher and a role model, Tony Robbins, at one of his events. He pointed it out and it immediately felt like truth in my body. And I began to dig deeper into this topic. Well, think about the father figure is the figure who represents provision in our life. It's a person that archetypally provides, right? So if you had that person missing, or they were not able to provide for you in a way that is consistent or sustainable or loving, your psyche will mirror that as a relationship with abundance, inconsistent, unstable, unpredictable, right? So when we look deeper into that and the process, kind of the reward of doing this exploration, is that we learn to mature and we learn to heal our inner child that has been impacted by these wounds and these traumas, and we become the parent that we've never had, right? When I think about my own father, the number one emotion that I've experienced anytime I would meet my father when I was little, it was emotion of embarrassment and shame, because my father was an alcoholic. From the moment I remember, I would often smell alcohol on his breath every time he wanted to hug me as a little child. And I had this repulsion toward it. And I was embarrassed by him. And I was ashamed of him. And if you study the frequency scale, the emotions or the states of being, a vibrational scale that was brought to us by evolutionary writer David Hawkins, the lowest human emotion that will pull you into a very low vibration is shame, right? Is shame and guilt. So every time I would interact with my father, we didn't live together, My father and my mother have been divorced since I was 1 year old, but he lived in the same city as me, and I would run into him on the street. And if I was with my school friends and I would see my dad just stumbling and drifting, you know how drunk people do, where they can't even walk straight, this was so embarrassing for me. And I was ashamed of my father. So I didn't want to do anything with him probably the first chapter of my life. And then around 15 or 16 years old, I began to feel guilt and trying to rescue him. The rescue archetype kicked in, and I just wanted to bring some sanity to him, and I wanted to love him to such a degree that he had no point but to change. A little bit of a naive thinking, right? But have you ever been in that situation where you want to change an addict to the point where you begin to be codependent in that process, and you want transformation for another person more than they are capable desiring for themselves? So I went through that chapter where I tried to save him and I tried to rescue him, and I became really involved into his life story. And then the next chapter, after I began working with strong shamanic visionary plants such as ayahuasca, I have an apprenticeship with ayahuasca for 13 years of my life. So many ceremonies that I've said before it became popular and mainstream. You know, I started working with those plants when it was deep underground and it was very difficult to access it. And ayahuasca began to teach me how to love somebody with compassionate detachment and how to honor the soul's journey and their karmic path. And she began to guide me into releasing my attachment to my dad's awakening. And I see this was a powerful pivot in me healing my father wound, is releasing codependency, releasing the attachment of having a different kind of story with my dad. You know, I was so invested in some kind of a story of redemption, that one day will come and he will come into his clarity and he will see me. I just so wanted to be seen by my dad. I so wanted to be acknowledged by my dad. And this, how I unconsciously held myself back from receiving the success that I knew I could attain. I was waiting for him. I was waiting for him to see me, to acknowledge me, to notice me. And working with ayahuasca helped me realize that he is not capable of doing that. And I would wait forever. And instead, I was invited by my soul to make a very powerful choice to release my dad to his karmic path. I remember writing a letter to him, which he never acknowledged, by the way. And I don't know if he ever received it, or if he received it and didn't acknowledge because he just didn't know what to say, or if he never received it. But you know, it doesn't really matter. What really mattered is for me writing that letter. It was 4 or 5 pages where I wrote to him everything that I couldn't say to him in person. My grieving inner child finally had a voice. And I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote about the pain of embarrassment when he would knock on my classroom door, asking my school teacher to bring me out of the middle of the class to talk to my dad, where clearly he was drunk. I wrote about those moments of humiliation, embarrassment, and shame, and anger that was deeply underneath that. Anger of not being seen, anger of not being acknowledged. And then when I named those feelings, I shifted into the clarity that I was writing from. And the clarity was, Dad, I'm finally able to write to you this. I am at peace with your choices, and I am not invested in you changing your path. Your path is your own, and this is the letter to say, I honor you and I set myself free. This was so powerful because when you arrive to that point, you liberate yourself from the karmic hooks. You liberate yourself from this unconscious repetition of your parents' blueprint. And to me, that was really, really powerful because when I began learning how to see myself, when I began learning how to acknowledge myself, when I began learning how to be proud of myself, that's where my relationship with abundance began to change. I was able to receive more and feel worthy of it. You see, when you have a distant parent, especially father figure, it creates the worthiness wound. And it's this invisible ceiling to how much abundance you feel worthy to receive. And you may have this hidden program running in your subconscious mind that you are only worthy of particular number. And if it goes a little bit higher, all of your limiting beliefs begin to fire up and you start creating chaos, or you start dropping balls. I think that's the expression in American English. You start dropping balls, right? And you start creating a mess, and you start letting yourself down and getting in the way because it's your unconscious programs firing it up. When you receive abundance, here's my practical process for you. Say to yourself, by holding your hand on the heart, because every time you engage your body with these processes, you are anchoring it in your subconscious mind. So hold the hand on your heart and you say, I am worthy. I am so worthy to receive this financial abundance and more. Because when I prosper, entire universe prospers. When I receive, I am generous. I give back. I invest in the projects that matter, right? Whatever self-talk that resonates for you, I find that abundance only brings out what's already within us. Money only amplifies what's already within us. So if you have a heart of service, if you have this desire to make a positive contribution in the world, more money will only amplify that desire, and you'll be able to do so much more good. It's not going to corrupt you. Money is not the source of all evil. That's just the old programs that were popular at one point in the collective, right? We can really write new story. There are so many incredibly wealthy people who do great things in the world with their resources, and you can be one of them. And what I know to be true is when you live in service to your higher calling, when you live from your soul and not from your ego, your true path in life, that's called your dharma, will always bring you the exact amount of financial resources that are required for you to move to the next level, to create your next leap, right? To be of help to other people, to create a life that nourishes you, that really inspires you, because our environment matters. So when you heal your father wound, it's the wound of worthiness. When I think about the mother wound is the wound of intimacy. The father wound is the wound of worthiness. That's why you see some people who really have a hard time to open themselves up to abundance. They barely make their ends meet. They feel they need to work so hard for the little that they get. And it's the wound of worthiness. So how do you heal the wound of worthiness? How do you heal anything? You heal it first with awareness, becoming aware that it exists within you. Second, you seek support. It's very important to engage in some kind of a spiritual counseling or spiritual therapy. There are so many incredibly qualified therapists in this world, right? Seek one. Set an intention to be guided to one. Engage in some kind of a group study. I have a course called Frequency Shift that you can access on demand, or you can see when is the next time I teach it live. But it's a very powerful. Every time I think about frequency shift, I want to teach it like tomorrow again. But it's a self-study. You can access it on demand. Just a lot of my students really love going through live programs with me because it's a channel transmission, and we work on healing the mother wound and the father wound, or starting the process, because you are the ultimate healer of your heart, beloved friend. The other people hold space for you. The other people provide you some guidance and some tools. You are the healer of your heart. And that's probably the number one message that I want to encourage you. You know, you can heal. You can heal from deep, deep stuff. I have such compassion for my dad. Just to briefly tell you a story, what happened. My dad had a huge trauma that he never healed from. I grew up in Soviet Russia, Soviet Union, where my dad went on the street with his car, trying to just earn a little bit of money, and kind of like a Russian version of an Uber, but 40 years ago. Imagine that. And he was not sober. He was drinking, and he was behind the wheel in the middle of Russian winter, not completely sober. And what happened? He hits two people crossing the street, and one person dies on the spot. My dad's dreams died on the spot that day as well, because he was a promising student for a Russian Navy Academy. My dad was smart. He had some good talents, but he had an addiction, probably stemming from being abandoned by his dad, right? It's all karmic family history. So my dad goes to jail immediately. And from that point, he has a criminal record. And in Soviet Union at that time, it was like a scarlet letter on your forehead. You couldn't hide from that. And you would become a second-class citizen without access to any sort of therapy, to any counseling. There was no internet. There was no self-help books. So imagine the situation. You and your trauma and a ton of shame. And the only way to feel better in the moment from his perspective was to drink. So I can give you this understanding now at 42 years old. But when I was a kid and not knowing the story, all I felt was the burden of being ashamed for my father. So when we reach an understanding of having this level of depth of conversation, we are ready to do this powerful work. And because when you heal your family lineage, you are going to go to a completely new level of liberation, a new level of joy, a new level of empowerment. That's what I desire for you to experience. So the muddy and messy process of looking into those wounds is so worth the liberation that you're going to discover on the other side. So take heart, beloved soul. Take heart. I am going to finish this video with pointing you out to a free resource that I have. It's called the Karmic Clearing Course. And it's just 3 short videos that I put together for you. They go over each topic. There is a money clearing, there is intimacy clearing, and there is a full aura clearing. Those are the tools. They're not going to do the magic, right? They're going to bring you relief, but you get to remember you are the healer of your heart. Take these tools and begin the process. And if you want to go deeper, you can send me a message, you can leave me a comment, and I will point you into other resources that I have available. You can heal your life. You can start right now. And I hope this video gave you inspiration to not delay this process, to trust that you will have the courage, the confidence, and guidance of your higher self. Your liberation, your fulfillment, and your abundance await. Whew!